There's this book called, this one. You probably know it. Who Moved My Cheese? And it's so short that I was thinking maybe I could read it on stream, though it might be copyrighted. But it's so short. It's the kind of like it's. I've been recommended this article, this book, and the reason why I was recommended it is because it says that instead of asking why we are so Who Moved My Cheese is like a motivational business fable. Instead of asking you why you lost your job, instead of asking why your conditions are not good, just act and make your conditions better. That's basically the whole point of this. And I was criticized by someone in my family for asking questions too much like why, right? Why are people making, why are billionaires so fucking rich and we're so fucking poor compared to them, right? Why does the system seem so biased towards their success and so averse to ours? Why does our system put us in competition against one another when cooperation could make us so happy? And this Who Moved My Cheese, an amazing way to deal with change in your work, in your life. So if there's something that changes in your work, in your life, the conclusion is, and I'll spoil it, I'm sorry, is the way to deal with change in your work, in your life is not to think about it, think of how, why, and all of that. It's just continue, continue the grind, because it doesn't change anything to ask why. And the allegory of the fable, as they say, is that you have mice who, I think they're in a maze and they're going for the cheese, and then the cheese is displaced. Spoilers, fuck. The cheese moves. And then the two mice, instead of going for the cheese after it moved, they asked themselves, who moved it? Why did it move? And Mr. Johnson says, well, if the mouse, instead of asking why it moved or asking questions, just went for the cheese and went back to look for it, they'd be better off, right? Because they'd be closer to the cheese than if they asked why it moved. In the corporate environment, management has been known to distribute this book to employees during times of structural reorganization or during cost-cutting measures in an attempt to portray unfavorable or unfair changes in an optimistic or opportunistic way. This has been characterized by Barbara Ehrenreich in her book Bright-Sided: How the Relentless Promotion of Positive Thinking Has Undermined America as an attempt by organizational management to make employees quickly and unconditionally assimilate management ideals, even if they may prove detrimental to them professionally. Ehrenreich called the book the classic of downsizing propaganda, and summarizes its message as the dangerous human tendencies to overanalyze and complain must be overcome for a more rodent-like approach to life. When you lose a job, just shut up and scamper along to the next one. You know what? We'll try to read it, all right? All right, let's see how that goes. If we get bored, we can stop. Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. Who Moved My Cheese? An amazing way to deal with change in your work and in your life. Who Moved My Cheese is a simple parable that reveals profound truths about change. It is an amusing and enlightening story of four characters who live in a maze and look for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. Two are mice named Sniff and Scurry, and two are little people, beings the size of mice who look and act a lot like people. Their names are Hem and Haw. Cheese is a metaphor for what you want to have in life, whether it's a good job, a loving relationship, money, a possession, good health, or a spiritual peace of mind. And the maze is where you look for what you want, the organization you work in, or the family or community you live in. In the story, the characters are faced with unexpected change. Eventually, one of them deals with it successfully and writes what he has learned from his experience on the maze walls. When you come to see the handwriting on the wall, you can discover for yourself how to deal with change so that you can enjoy less stress and more success. however you define it, in your work and in your life. Written for all ages, this story takes less than an hour to read, but its unique insights can last for a lifetime. So since it's written for all ages, chat will understand, which is good, which is what we need, right? Parts of all of us, the simple and the complex. The four imaginary characters depicted in this story, the mice Sniff and Scurry, and the little people, Hem and Haw, are intended to represent the simple and the complex parts of ourselves, regardless of our age, gender, race, or nationality. Gotta love this. Do they drink Bud Light, you think? Are they woke? Because that sounds like it's woke. Anyway. Sometimes we may act like Sniff, who sniffs out change early, or Scurry, who scurries into action, or Hem, who denies and resists change as he fears it will lead to something worse, or Haw, who learns to adapt in time when he sees changing can lead to something better. Whatever parts of us we choose to use, we all share something in common, a need to find our way in the maze and succeed in changing times. It's finally something for my level. Chat is all ages. Chat is outside of time. That is true. Chat is all ages at the same time. So, how to act in the face of change? There's 4 options here. Who sniffs out change early? Who scurries into action? Who denies and resists change as he fears it will lead to something worse? Who learns to adapt in time when he sees changing can lead to something better? I think a lot of us, especially as leftists, we are here. Who denies and resists change as he fears it will lead to something worse. This might sound like more conservative, because when we talk about progress, we talk about changing for the better. But here, when it comes to corporate life and stuff, and things that get worse objectively for workers and better for the employers, which is what this book was written for. If we trust Wikipedia, then this resisting change is resisting change that is that goes against our interest. And I feel like this is fine, right? And I believe, this is my foreshadowing, I believe that this book will advocate for learning to adapt in time when adapting to change and making the best out of it, which is what some philosophers would call slave morality or slave mentality. When something goes bad, or if a change happens and goes against your interest, instead of trying to resist that change, accept it and do the best you can. So let's see if this book praises slave morality or slave mentality. A gathering, Chicago. One sunny Sunday in Chicago, several former classmates who were good friends in school gathered for lunch, having attended their high school reunion the night before. They wanted to hear more about what was happening in each other's lives. After a good deal of kidding and a good meal, they settled into an interesting conversation. Angela, who had been one of the most popular people in the class, said, "Life sure turned out differently than I thought it would when we were in school. A lot has changed." "It certainly has," Nathan echoed. They knew he had gone into his family's business, which had operated pretty much the same and had been a part of the local community for as long as they could remember. So they were surprised when he seemed concerned. He asked, "But have you noticed how we don't want to change when things change?" Carlos said, "I guess we resist changing because we're afraid of change." "Carlos, you were captain of the football team," Jessica said. "I never thought I'd hear you say anything about being afraid." They all laughed as they realized that although they had gone off in different directions, from working at home to managing companies, they were experiencing similar feelings. Everyone was trying to cope with the unexpected changes that were happening to them in recent years, and most admitted that they did not know a good way to handle them. First time I actually read self-help, Tamer. It's the first time. It's interesting. It's fun. Then Michael said, I used to be afraid of change. When a big change came along in our business, we didn't know what to do, so we didn't adjust and we almost lost it. That is, he continued, until I heard a funny little story that changed everything. How so? Nathan asked. Well, the story changed the way I looked at change, from losing something to gaining something, and it showed me how to do it. After that, things quickly improved at work and in my life. At first, I was annoyed with the obvious simplicity of the story because it sounded like something we might have been told in school. Then I realized I was really annoyed with myself for not seeing the obvious and doing what works when things change. Not gonna lie, this book sounds so patronizing. Yeah. Can you imagine, like, you've been either laid off or your work conditions have been lowered because of downsizing and things like that, and someone gives you this book and they're like, listen, I know you're going through tough times, these changes really suck, and we have no choice at the company to do them, but read this book, maybe that's going to help you. When I realized the 4 characters in the story represented the various parts of myself, I decided who I wanted to act like, and I changed. Later, I passed the story on to some people in our company, and they passed it on to others, and soon our business did much better because most of us adapted to change better. And like me, many people said it helped them in their personal lives. However, there were a few people who said they got nothing out of it. They either knew the lessons and were already living them, or more commonly, they thought they already knew everything and didn't want to learn. They couldn't see why so many others were benefiting from it. When one of our senior executives, who was having difficulty adapting, said the story was a waste of time, other people kidded him, saying they knew which character he was in the story, meaning the one who learned nothing new and did not change. What's the story? Angela asked. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? And then the chat goes wild. What? Who moved my cheese? Actually, no. The group laughed. I think I already like it. The group laughed. I think I like it already, Carlos said. Would you tell us the story? Maybe we can get something from it. Sure, Michael replied. I'd be happy to. It doesn't take long. And so he began. So, it sounds like this asshole believes in free will. This is so funny. If I ever write a book, I'll have characters say that the book's title is really, really good and that the characters like it. And I'll talk about how the book is so good in the introduction of the book by having fictional characters talk about how good this book is. This really feels like it's trying to frame anyone who might disagree with the story as wrong. No. You're acting in bad faith, pyroanarchist. This book is not trying to frame anything, okay? It's just trying to give you advice on how to deal with changes, okay? Who Moved My Cheese? The story. UNCE, long ago in a land far away, there... Oh, it's once, right? Sorry. On recommence. Once, long ago in a land far away, there lived 4 characters. Is it uns? Is it German? Uns? There lived 4 little characters who ran through a maze looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. And make them happy. 2 were mice, named Sniff and Scurry, and 2 were little people, beings who were as small as mice, but who looked and acted a lot like people today. Their names were Hem and Haw. Proof that self-help books authors can't write. That's really mean. Due to their small size, it would be easy not to notice what the 4 of them were doing, but if you looked closely enough, you could discover the most amazing things. Every day, the mice and the little people spent time in the maze looking for their own special cheese. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, possessing simple brains and good instincts, searched for the hard, nibbling cheese they liked, as mice often do. The 2 little people, Hem and Haw, used their complex brains, filled with many beliefs and emotions, to search for a very different kind of cheese, with a capital C, which they believed would make them feel happy and successful. As different as the mice and little people were, they shared something in common. Every morning, they each put on their jogging suits and running. Sorry. Every morning, they each put on their jogging suits and running shoes, left their little homes, and raced out into the maze looking for their favorite cheese. What is the C, right? What is the C, guys? It could be cringe, as Pyroanarchist says. Capital, that's what I thought first. But it's because it says capital C, so it's not capital, right? It's not. I think it's capital C is for cash. That's what I think it's going to be. Which they believed would make them feel happy and successful. They believe it's cash, but it's not cash. It's what's rewarding is not the cash, but it's knowing that you work really hard for a boss in a business you really like. He had to tell us that mice like cheese. Yeah. All right. We'll continue. This is fun. I like this. The maze was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, some containing delicious cheese, but there were also dark corners and blind alleys leading nowhere. It was an easy place for anyone to get lost. I really hate this story already. Remember how this the author said that some people would think that they know the answers and that they don't need to know the story? That's Sneaky Revenant right now, who says, I really hate this story already. Sneaky Revenant. The Mr. Spencer, I don't remember his name, predicted that you wouldn't like this story because he knows what kind of person you are. You're the kind of person who thinks you know everything. You're the kind of person who thinks they can't get advice from Mr. Dr. Spencer. Right? You're ignorant because you think you know everything. You have arrogance. Meanwhile, this doctor, Dr. Spencer, can give you this advice. So don't reject it like some kind of arrogant prick. All right, Sneaky Revenant? Temmer says, I feel like the author is talking down to me from a very, very, very high perch. Well, are you, Temmer, are you New York Times best-selling novel or self-help book writer, author? I don't think you are. In terms of writing self-help books and being known worldwide, Mr. Dr. Spencer, I don't know what their name is up there. Spencer Johnson, Mr. Dr. Johnson is on a very, very, very high perch. All right? You should maybe listen to him. We are all arrogant, know-it-all anarchists. Yeah. That is true. Let's try to be a bit less arrogant, right? We should stop looking down on this book from a very, very, very high perch. Let's know our place and listen to this. I was joking, Temmer, by the way, and Sneaky Revenant as well. I was being facetious. I don't know how to say that word. I was being fascistic. However, for those who found their way, the maze held secrets that let them enjoy a better life. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, used the simple trial and error method of finding cheese. They ran down one corridor, and if it proved empty, they turned and ran down another. They remembered the corridors that held no cheese and quickly went into new areas. They're hard-working mice. They're good boys. Sniff would smell out the general direction of the cheese using his great nose, and Scurry would race ahead. They got lost, as you might expect, went off in the wrong direction, and often bumped into walls. But after a while, they found their way. Like the mice, the two little people, Hem and Haw, also used their ability to think and learn from their past experiences. However, they relied on their complex brains to develop more sophisticated methods of finding cheese. Sometimes they did well, but at other times, their powerful human beliefs and emotions took over and clouded the way they looked at things. It made life in the maze more complicated and challenging. See, they were thinking a bit too much. And thinking, when you need to work, is not a good thing, folks. It just slows you down. Nonetheless, Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw all discovered in their own way what they were looking for. They each found their own kind of cheese one day at the end of one of the corridors in Cheese Station C. Every morning after that, the mice and the little people dressed in their running gear and headed over to Cheese Station C. It wasn't long before they each established their own routine. Sniff and Scurry continued to wake every day and race through the maze, always following the same route. When they arrived at their destination, the mice took off their running shoes, tied them together, and hung them around their necks. Their necks, so they could get to them quickly whenever they needed them again. Then they enjoyed the cheese. In the beginning, Hem and Haw also raced towards Cheese Station C every morning to enjoy the tasty new morsels that awaited them. But after a while, a different routine set in for the little people. Hem and Haw awoke each day a little later, dressed a little slower, and walked to Cheese Station C. After all, they knew where the cheese was now and how to get there. They got lazy. They stopped working really hard because they just took everything for granted. They became, what's the word? They became entitled. Entitlement is a scourge. They have a safe resource of food, right? Yet they don't want to work as much as possible to make sure to secure that food. That's crazy. Why wouldn't they want to work 100% and race to the cheese to make sure that they have it? Right? Why do they want to conserve their energy? Why do they want to take their time? Why do they want to even enjoy life? They should put on their sneakers and run right to the cheese, even if they know that it's going to be there every day, right? They become lazy. They become entitled. You should scurry like rats every single day to be able to eat. You shouldn't take that for granted. Don't take your well-being as granted. You should always work at the maximum capacity that you can to get it. Hem and Haw awoke each day a little later, dressed a little slower, and walked to Cheese Station C. They were walking. They weren't even running, guys. Whew. After all, they knew where the cheese was now and how to get there. They had no idea where the cheese came from or who put it there. They just assumed it would be there. As soon as Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C each morning, they settled in and made themselves at home. They hung up their jogging suits, put away their running shoes, and put on their slippers. They were becoming very comfortable now that they had found the cheese. Look at Hem and Haw trying to live lives of comfort, in a world where comfort is weakness. "This is great," Hem said. "There's enough cheese here This is great, Hem said. "There's enough cheese here to last us forever." The little people felt happy and successful, and thought they were now secure. It wasn't long before Hem and Haw regarded the cheese they found at Cheese Station C as their cheese. It was such a large store of cheese that they eventually moved their homes to be closer to it, and built a social life around it. To make themselves feel more at home, Hem and Haw decorated the walls with sayings and even drew pictures of cheese around them, which made them smile. One read, "Having cheese makes you happy." Sometimes Hem and Haw would take their friends by to see their pile of cheese at Cheese Station C and point to it with pride, saying, "Pretty nice cheese, hub." Sometimes they shared it with their friends, and sometimes they didn't. "We deserve this cheese," Hem said. "We certainly had to work long and hard enough to find it." He picked up a nice fresh piece and ate it. Afterward, Hem fell asleep, as he often did. Every night, the little people would waddle home full of cheese, and every morning they would confidently return for more. This went on for quite some time. After a while, Hem's and Haw's confidence grew into the arrogance of success. Soon they became so comfortable they didn't even notice what was happening. As time went on, Sniff and Scurry continued their routine. They arrived early each morning and sniffed and scratched and scurried around Cheese Station C, inspecting the area to see if there had been any changes from the day before. Then they would sit down and nibble on the cheese. One morning they arrived at Cheese Station C and discovered there was no cheese. They weren't surprised, since Sniff and Scurry had noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller every day. They were prepared for the inevitable and knew instinctively what to do. They looked at each other, removed their running shoes they had tied together and hung conveniently around their necks, put them on their feet, and laced them up. The mice did not overanalyze things. To the mice, the problem and the answer were both simple. The situation at Cheese Station C had changed, so Sniff and Scurry decided to change. They both looked out into the maze, then Sniff lifted his nose, sniffed, and nodded to Scurry, who took off running through the maze, while Sniff followed as fast as he could. They were quickly off in search of new cheese. Later that same day, Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C. They had not been paying attention to the small changes that had been taking place each day, so they took it for granted their cheese would be there. They were unprepared for what they found. "What? No cheese!" Hem yelled. He continued yelling, "No cheese! No cheese!" as though if he shouted loud enough, someone would put it back. "Who moved my cheese?" he hollered. Who moved my cheese? Who moved my cheese? That's the title of the book. They wrote it. They actually wrote it. They did it. They did it. Finally, he put his hand up on his hips. His face turned red, and he screamed at the top of his voice, "It's not fair!" I don't know why he talks like that. He's just entitled, I guess. Title job, yeah. Haw just shook his head in disbelief. He too had counted on finding cheese at Cheese Station C. He stood there for a long time, frozen with shock. He was just not ready for this. Hem was yelling something, but Haw didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to deal with what was facing him, so he just tuned everything out. The little people's behavior was not very attractive or productive, but it was understandable. Finding cheese wasn't easy, and it meant a great deal more to the little people than just having enough of it to eat every day. Finding cheese was the little people's way of getting what they thought they needed to be happy. They had their own ideas of what cheese meant to them, depending on their taste. For some, finding cheese was having material things. For others, it was enjoying good health or developing a spiritual sense of well-being. For Haw, cheese just meant feeling safe, having a loving family someday, and living in a cozy cottage on Cheddar Lane. To Hem, cheese was becoming a big cheese in charge of others and owning a big house atop Camembert Hill. Because cheese was important to them, the two little people spent a long time trying to decide what to do. All they could think of was to keep looking around Cheeseless Station C to see if the cheese was really gone. While Sniff and Scurry had quickly moved on, Hem and Haw continued to hem and haw. They ranted and raved at the injustice of it all. Haw started to get depressed. What would happen if the cheese wasn't there tomorrow? He had made future plans based on this cheese. The little people couldn't believe it. How could this have happened? No one had warned them. It wasn't right. It was not the way things were supposed to be. Hem and Haw went home that night hungry and discouraged, but before they left, Haw wrote on the wall, "The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it." Tamara says, "I'm sold on this story's brilliance as a political commentary. I feel like it was written by a dedicated political propagandist in the 50s. Yeah, I know, exactly. We'll continue, hold on, but I just want to talk about how here, the problem with the little people is that they settled down. What else did they do? He made future plans based on this cheese. And am I enlightened yet? I don't know. Are you? It's coming. Maybe if you're not yet, just wait, it's coming. But this whole idea that workforce needs to always be first, 100% productive, but most of all, always be ready to be movable, right? Because now they're going to talk how they need to move their houses. They made future plans, but they shouldn't, because the workplace should always, the workforce, the proletariat should always be malleable. You should be ready to change your job tomorrow, because you might lose your job tomorrow. Maybe your factory is going to close down tomorrow. So don't make plans too hard or too far ahead, because you might always be able to, you'll maybe always have to move, right? Don't get complacent in your job, because you might lose it, or you might some things might change where your conditions are not great. So this ideology that's pushed by this book is to say workers You are always at the mercy of bosses because they're the ones who give you cheese. And if they want you to move, you'll have to move. If they want you to do something, you'll have to do something. And if you don't act like mice, if you complain about the injustice, if you don't instead of just acting and doing the job, if you think too much, well, you'll just starve as Hem and what's his name? Hem and Hef are. Hem and Ha. So the political ideology behind this is shut the fuck up, be a mouse, do the work you need, and be ready to always change conditions. Don't make plans on the future. Live in the present because the future can always change because maybe the boss will have different plans for you in the future. There's a very strong ideological... by the way, there's a version for this for kids, by the way. Anyway. They're very strong. They're grooming kids through the mouse parable. But there's a strong ideological and political commentary here, as Temer said. The next day, Hem and Ha left their homes and returned to Cheese Station C again, where they still expected somehow to find their cheese. The situation hadn't changed. The cheese was no longer there. The little people didn't know what to do. Hem and Ha just stood there, immobilized like two statues. Ha shut his eyes as tight as he could and put his hands over his ears. He just wanted to block everything out. He didn't want to know the cheese supply had gradually been getting smaller. He believed it had been moved all of a sudden. Hem analyzed the situation over and over, and eventually his complicated brain, with its huge belief system, took on. "Why did they do this to me?" he demanded. "What's really going on here?" Finally, Ha opened his eyes, looked around, and said, "By the way, where are Sniff and Scurry? Do you think they know something we don't?" Hem scoffed. "What would they know?" Hem continued, "They're just mice. They just respond to what happens. We're little people. We're smarter than mice. We should be able to figure this out." "I know we're smarter," Ha said, "but we don't seem to be acting smarter at the moment. Things are changing around here, Hem. Maybe we need to change and do things differently." "Why should we change?" Hem asked. "We're little people. We're special. This sort of thing should not happen to us. Or if it does, we should at least get some benefits." "Why should we get benefits?" Ha asked. "Because we're entitled," Hem claimed. I don't know why I'm giving him this whiny voice. How did I predict that he's entitled? Entitled to what? Ha wanted to know. "We're entitled to our cheese." "Why?" Ha asked. "Because we didn't cause this problem," Hen said. "Somebody else did this and we should get something out of it." Ha suggested, maybe we should simply stop analyzing the situation so much and go find some new cheese. "Oh no," Hem argued. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this." Pyroanarchist says, Hem makes very good points. He's definitely winning this debate. Oh yeah. Hem is very, very well framed here. This makes it a very balanced debate that gives the viewer the opportunity of siding with one another. It's not a very biased debate to show that one side is obviously right and one side is obviously wrong. No, we shouldn't come to our own conclusions. This allegory just shoves the conclusion down your throat. Zgil Ward says the message of the author's own book is flying over their head. Someone had to put these mice into the maze in the first place. Yeah, exactly. I know that. We'll talk about that at the end. If maybe they'll talk about that. I don't know. We'll see what it means. Temer says it's like Franz Kafka wrote, "You are at the mercy of uncaring systems of whim and cruelty, and it's your fault for not grinding harder." Did he say grinding harder? If he said grinding harder, Kafka is even cooler than I thought. But yeah, that definitely makes is relevant here. Let the mice get out of the maze and do what mice do. Don't force them into this. I was gonna say inhumane, but I guess unmice system. All right, we'll continue. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this. While Hem and Haw were still trying to decide what to do, Sniff and Scurry were already well on their way. They went further into the maze, up and down corridors, looking for cheese in every cheese station they could find. They didn't think of anything else but finding new cheese. They didn't find any for some time, but until they finally went into an area of the maze where they had never been before, cheese station. They didn't find any for some time until they finally went into an area of the maze where they had never been before, cheese station N. They squealed with delight. They found what they had been looking for, a great supply of new cheese. So the mice found new cheese. They could hardly believe their eyes. It was the biggest store of cheese the mice had ever seen. In the meantime, Hem and Haw were still back in Cheese Station C, evaluating their situation. They were now suffering from the effects of having no cheese. They were becoming frustrated and angry, and were blaming each other for the situation they were in. Now and then, Haw thought about his mice friends, Sniff and Scurry, and wondered if they had found any cheese yet. He believed they might be having a hard time, as running through the maze usually involved some uncertainty, but he also knew that it was likely to only last for a while. Sometimes, Haw would imagine Sniff and Scurry finding new cheese and enjoying it. He thought about how good it would have been for him to be out on an adventure in the maze. Because that's what the maze is. It's an adventure. Keep in mind, the maze is finding a new job, or the maze is being given a new responsibility at your job right now. So this is an adventure. You know, when you're looking for a job and like you don't have cheese, so you can't feed yourself. Well, instead of seeing it as like, oh my god, this maze situation really sucks, you should see it as an adventure. Imagine like trying to find new cheese so that you don't starve. Isn't that fun? The adventure was the maze we cheesed along the way. Yeah, you are doing this right. Adventure in the maze, and to find fresh new cheese. He could almost taste it. The more clearly Haw saw the message of himself finding and enjoying the new cheese, the more he saw himself leaving Cheese Station C. "Let's go," he claimed all of a sudden. "No," Hem quickly responded. "I like it here. It's comfortable. It's what I know. Besides, it's dangerous out there." "No, it isn't," Haw argued. "We've run through many parts of the maze before, and we can do it again." "I'm getting too old for that," Hem said, "and I'm afraid I'm not interested in getting lost and making a fool of myself. Are you?" With that, Haw's fear of failing returned, and his hope of finding new cheese faded. I think Hem's problem is not that he's afraid of failure. It's that he's hungry and he's put into a situation where he needs to, he's in a maze to feed himself. And now the source of food that people were putting in front of him every day was taken away. And now he has to go back in the maze or starve or die. Right? I think his problem is, what the fuck is this deal? What the fuck is going on here? Right? It's not that he's afraid of making a fool out of himself. It's that he's being played with so that he can feed himself. And he's made so that he can't have future plans. Right? Because his future plans might hinder his ability to feed himself in the immediate present. That's fucked up. That's not a situation that you should accept. Pyroanarchist says, "This is a way more interesting story than The Maze Runner." Tamer says, "Animal Farm but rewritten from Napoleon's POV after he exiled Snowball and sold Boxer to the glue factory." Exactly. This is an allegory written from the point of view of an authoritarian. Literally telling people to act like mice. Not a good look. I don't know why I was first recommended this, or why anybody recommends this, and why it's a bestseller and it's so popular. It's quite frankly dehumanizing. Making a fool of myself. Are you? With that, Haw's fear of failing returned, and his hope of finding new cheese faded. So every day, the little people continued to do what they had done before. They went to Cheese Station C, found no cheese, and returned home, carrying their worries and frustrations with them. They tried to deny what was happening, but found it harder to get to sleep, had less energy the next day, and were becoming irritable. Their homes were not the nurturing places they once were. The little people had difficulty sleeping and were having nightmares about not finding any cheese. But Hem and Ha still returned to Cheese Station C and waited there every day. Hem said, if we just work harder, we'll find that nothing has really changed that much. The cheese is probably nearby. Maybe they just hid it behind the wall. The next day, Hem and Ha returned with tools. Hem held the chisel, while Ha banged on the hammer until they made a hole in the wall of Cheese Station C. They pierced inside but found no cheese. They were disappointed but believed they could solve the problem. So they started earlier, stayed longer, and worked harder, but after a while, all they had was a large hole in the wall. Ha was beginning to realize the difference between activity and productivity. Maybe, Hem said, we should just sit here and see what happens. Sooner or later, they have to put the cheese back. Ha wanted to believe that, so each day he went home to rest and returned reluctantly with Hem to Cheese Station C. But cheese never reappeared. Be interesting to see what is the whole idea of unions. How does this author see the whole idea of unions? What does this author think of the idea of minimum wage? Is minimum wage being entitled? Is that trying to work, get more cheese and not be satisfied with the cheese that you already have? Is job security being entitled? What else? The 8-hour workday, is that being lazy? The mice don't count their hours. They do the work they need to do. Little people, they count their hours, they're lazy, they don't actually want to work like the mice do. He's saying that rat race is good actually. Yeah, it's fucked up. But funny. Let's continue. By now, the little people were growing weak from hunger and stress. Ha was getting tired of just waiting for their situation to improve. He began to see that the longer they stayed in their cheeseless situation, the worse off they would be. Ha knew they were losing their edge. Finally, one day, Ha began laughing at himself. Ha, look at us. We keep doing the same things over and over again and wonder why things don't get better. If this wasn't so ridiculous, it would be even funnier. Ha did not like the idea of having to run through the maze again, because he knew he would get lost and have no idea where he would find any cheese. But he had to laugh at his folly when he saw that his fear was doing to him, what his fear was doing to him. He asked Hem, where did we put our running shoes? It took a long time to find them because they had put everything away when they found their cheese at Cheese Station C, thinking they wouldn't be needing them anymore. As Hem saw his friend getting into his running gear, he said, "You're not really going out in the maze again, are you? Why don't you just wait here with me until they put the cheese back?" "Because you just don't get it," Ha said. "I didn't want to see it either, but now I realize they're never going to put yesterday's cheese back. It's time to find new cheese." Hem argued, But what if there is no cheese out there? Or even if there is, what if you don't find it?" "I don't know," Ha said. He had asked himself those same questions too many times and felt the fears again that kept him where he was. He asked himself, where am I most likely to find cheese, here or in the maze? He painted a picture in his mind. He saw himself venturing out in the maze with a smile on his face. While this picture surprised him, it made him feel good. He saw himself getting lost now and then in the maze, but felt confident he would eventually find new cheese out there and all the good things that came with it. He gathered his courage. Then he used his imagination to paint the most believable picture he could, with the most realistic details of him finding and enjoying the taste of new cheese. He saw himself eating Swiss cheese with holes in it, bright orange cheddar and American cheeses, Italian mozzarella, and wonderfully soft French camembert cheese. And then he heard Hem say something and realized they were still at Cheese Station C. Ha said, "Sometimes, Hem, things change, and they're never the same again. This looks like one of those times. That's life. Life moves on, and so should we." Ha looked at his emaciated companion and tried to talk sense to him, but Hem's fear had turned into anger and he wouldn't listen. Ha didn't mean to be rude to his friend, but he had to laugh at how silly they both looked. As Ha prepared to leave, he started to feel more alive, knowing that he was finally able to laugh at himself, let go and move on. Ha laughed and announced, "It's maze time." Hem didn't laugh and he didn't respond. Ha picked up a small, sharp rock and wrote a serious thought on the wall for Hem to think about. As was his custom, Ha even drew a picture of cheese around it, hoping it would help Hem to smile, lighten up, and go after the new cheese, but Hem didn't want to see it. It read, "Why do mice need running shoes?" That's the biggest inconsistency of this book. It's Mazen time. All right, so what did Ha draw on the wall? "If you do not change, you can become extinct." Damn, Ha. Kind of sad. Then Ha stuck his head out and peered anxiously into the maze. He thought about how he'd gotten himself into this cheeseless situation. He had believed that there may not be any cheese in the maze, or he may not find it. Such fearful beliefs were immobilizing him and killing him. Ha smiled. He knew Hem was wondering, "Who moved my cheese?" But Ha was wondering, "Why didn't I get up and move with the cheese sooner?" As he started out into the maze, Ha looked back to where he had come from and felt its comfort. He could feel himself being drawn back into familiar territory, even though he hadn't found cheese here for some time. Ha became more anxious and wondered if he really wanted to go out into the maze. He wrote a saying on the wall ahead of him and stared at it for some time. What would you do if you weren't afraid? He thought about it. He knew sometimes some fear can be good. When you are afraid, things are going to get worse if you don't do something. It can prompt you into action, but it is not good when you are so afraid that it keeps you from doing anything. He looked to his right, to the part of the maze where he had never been, and felt the fear. Then he took a deep breath, turned right into the maze, and jogged slowly into the unknown. As he tried to find his way, Ha worried at first that he might have waited too long in Cheese Station C. He hadn't had any cheese for so long that he was now weak. It took him longer, and it was more painful than usual to get through the maze. He decided that if he ever got the chance again, he would get out of his comfort zone and adapt to change sooner. It would make things easier. Then Ha smiled a weak smile, and he thought, better late than never. During the next several days, Ha found a little cheese here and there, but nothing that lasted very long. He had hoped to find enough cheese to take some back to Hem and encourage him to come out of the maze. But Ha didn't feel confident enough yet. He had to admit he found it confusing in the maze. Things seemed to have changed since the last time he was out there. Just when he thought he was getting ahead, he would get lost in the corridors. It seemed his progress was 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. It was a challenge, but he had to admit that being back in the maze hunting for cheese wasn't nearly as bad as he feared it might be. As time went on, he began to wonder if it was realistic for him to expect to find new cheese. He wondered if he had bitten off more than he could chew. Then he laughed, realizing that he had nothing to chew on at the moment. Whenever he started to get discouraged, he reminded himself that what he was doing, as uncomfortable as it was at the moment, was in reality much better than staying in the cheeseless situation. He was taking control rather than simply letting things happen to him. Then he reminded himself, if Sniff and Scurry could move on, so could he. Later, as Ha looked back on things, he realized that the cheese at Cheese Station C had not just disappeared overnight as he had once believed. The amount of cheese that had been there toward the end had been getting smaller, and what was left had grown old. It didn't taste as good. Mold may even have begun to grow on the old cheese, although he hadn't noticed it. He had to admit, however, that if he had wanted to, he probably could have seen what was coming, but he didn't. Ha now realized that the change probably would not have taken him by surprise if he had been watching what was happening all along, and if he had anticipated change. Maybe that's what Sniff and Scurry had been doing. He decided he would stay more alert from now on. He would expect change to happen and look for it. He would trust his basic instincts to sense when change was going to occur and be ready to adapt to it. He stopped for a rest and wrote on the wall of the maze, "Smell the cheese often, so you know when it is getting old." Do we want to continue? I'm getting bored of this. This is stagnating. Cheese Station C, blah blah blah. Holy shit. The end. All right, let's read the end, okay? Sorry about that. I'm being lazy and entitled by skipping everything, but holy fuck. Let's read the last 2 pages and we can move on. Yeah, we got to move on. We got to adapt to change, and the change is I'm getting fucking bored of this. It was funny at first, but now it's just turning in circles. You can notice when the little changes began so that you would be better prepared for the big change that might be coming. He knew he needed to adapt faster, for if you do not adapt in time, you might as well not adapt at all. He had to admit that the biggest inhibitor to change lies within yourself, and that nothing gets better until you change. Perhaps most importantly, he realized that there is always new cheese out there, whether you recognize it at the time or not, and that you are rewarded with it when you go past your fear and enjoy the adventure. He knew some fear should be respected, as it can keep you out of real danger, but he realized most of his fears were irrational and had kept him from changing when he needed to. He didn't like it at the time, but he knew that the change had turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as it led him to find better cheese. He had even found a better part of himself. As Ha recalled what he had learned, he thought about his friend Hem. He wondered if Hem had read any of the sayings Ha had written on the wall at Cheese Station C and throughout the maze. Did he not see Hem anymore? Is Hem dead? I'm going to assume that Hem died of starvation at Cheese Station C. Even if he didn't, I think it's something I'm going to go with that narrative. Rip Hem. Rip Hem. Press F for Hem. Had Hem ever decided to let go and move on? I guess we'll never know. Had he ever entered the maze and discovered what could make his life better? Or was Hem still hemmed in because he would not change? Ha thought about going back again to Cheese Station C to see if he could find Hem, assuming that Ha could find his way back there. If he found Hem, he thought he might be able to show him how to get out of his predicament. But Ha realized that he already tried to get his friend to change. Hem had to find his own way, beyond his comforts and past his fears. No one else could do it for him, or talk him into it. He somehow had to see the advantage of changing himself. Ha knew he had left a trail for Hem and that he could find his way, if he could just read the handwriting on the wall. He went over and wrote down a summary of what he had learned on the largest wall of Cheese Station N. He drew a large piece of cheese around all the insights he had become aware of and smiled as he looked at what he had learned. Sounds a lot like Animal Farm, or the commandments. All right. What are the commandments? Hem, the favorite character of chat, died. I'm sorry, y'all. So first commandment is change happens. They keep moving the cheese. Second commandment, anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. 3, monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old. 4, adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. 5, change. Move with the cheese. 6, enjoy change. Savor the adventure and enjoy the taste of new cheese. 7, we're at 7, right? Yeah. Be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again and again. They keep moving the cheese. And we go back to they keep moving the cheese as change happens. So guys, life is a rat race that we cannot escape. Because they keep and so you should just enjoy it. You should enjoy having to scurry through dark halls of a maze to find cheese. This is your life now. Enjoy it. Move with the cheese and enjoy it. The end. Or is it a new beginning? That was something. What the fuck? Was it a good idea? What the fuck? I'm. Whew, I feel tired. Temmer says, I'm better for having known this exists. Remember when I was talking about free will and how you have to amass as much knowledge, information, experiences to make yourself the best person you could ever be? Well, that's an experience right there. You can thank me later. Oh, the cheese emote in Discord. Yeah, you guys should start using that more often. Look at that. As of 2018, so that was 5 years ago, it had sold almost 30 million copies worldwide in 37 languages and remains one of the best-selling business books. I don't know if you guys had ever heard of this book before, but it is pretty popular. I should have just read the Wikipedia article. All right, so why is this book criticized? Well, first let's talk about why this book appeals. Why is it good? What's the appeal of this book, and why is it good? Maybe someone can tell why it's good, right? Can anyone say in chat why it's good? It's somewhat, and people, the philosophers in chat might be able to correct me. And I'm talking to you, philosophers in chat. There's somewhat of a stoic, right, about this book. It's like a pre-stoic, because that was in 1998. So, and Stoicism just became popular recently, and right, it's like AI. It's just very new. So there's something like there's something about like that's very stoicist about this book, isn't there? Don't try to change things that is out of your control. That's what I get from Stoicism. I know it's more complicated than that, but don't try to change what you can't change, because you'll just burn yourself out, right? Is that what Stoicism is about? And in like part of it is true, right? Let's say like a business closes down, because this is often well, it's for business, right? And I think what it's often meant for, it might be business people, like actually CEOs and stuff like that. And for CEOs, it's I'm thinking like people who don't evolve their business might be, might just die, or might have their businesses die, in the sense of like innovation is important when you do business, right? You always got to strive to and when the market changes and when technology changes, you got to change with it, or else you'll be outdated and you will be eaten up by competition. And for CEOs, this makes sense. This is the capitalism 101. You need to adapt to change when change happens on the market, or when you want to be able to still be competitive. If you don't adapt to change, then others will, and then you'll lose your edge in terms of competitivity, right? So for CEOs, I feel like this makes sense. Now, for workers, and I think this is why it's been so distributed and so popular, and there's reasons why managers will distribute this to their employees, right? Because what it teaches is a mentality of submission. In terms of business and of being a capitalist and CEO, yes, you got to change, you got to adapt, you got to be always at the forefront of, you got to sniff out, potential markets to exploit and to maximize your profits as much as possible. No time to take a break. This is what capitalism forces you to do. You always need to be on the run. You always need to be like a little mouse. You always need to look for opportunities to expand. You always need to sell more, produce, find new markets, right? But is that what we really, really want for individuals? Is that what we want? Yeah, somebody says, I think the book came off as saying, if you work very hard in the system, you might get some cheese. The system can't change, but you can run the race harder. Exactly. You are put into a maze and someone decides where the cheese goes. You can start asking who puts the cheese and why they put the cheese and why do they take it away and all that. That's not going to help you eat. The only thing you can do, buddy, is sniff out the cheese and enjoy it once you have it, because it can always move. And the thing is, in a world, as somebody says, CEOs moved the cheese. In a world that is determined by corporate interests, the cheese and the location of the cheese, it's all the powerful people. On an individual level, the powerful people, they don't need to do the little rat race. They don't need to work every day and sniff out cheese and always be afraid that it might not be there. They have security. You don't. As Gil Warsh says, the path of freedom leads through the machine. Well, there's no other paths aside from inside the machine, right? At least that's what we get from Who Moved My Cheese. There's not even the possibility of getting out of the maze. There's not even a possibility of even seeing or pointing out the CEO. Because here, the whole moral of the story is not to think or to question. It's a bad thing to think and question. What is good is to act and follow the cheese. Right? It's like a carrot on a stick. It's basically a carrot on a stick. Don't ask who is holding the stick, right? And don't ask who put the carrot at the end of the stick. Just go for the carrot. Sometimes you'll get it, and then another one will appear. And just continue to just focus on the stick, on the carrot. Don't ever think twice. How poor was the propaganda? It was good propaganda. I think it's really good propaganda, and the fact that it's sold as of 2018, 30 million copies worldwide in 37 languages shows that it's good propaganda. Aaron Reich called it the classic of downsizing propaganda. In a world where downsizing becomes more and more prevalent with neoliberalism, more and more people will have their cheese moved. More and more people lose their jobs, right? And as technology replaces a lot of jobs, as we may know, a lot of people will have their cheese moved. A lot of people will have to take on the adventure of finding a new job, right? A lot of people will fear having to find a new job, but it's not scary, guys. You just got to take the adventure, as the book says. You have to take pleasure into finding new cheese. Of course, if you don't find cheese in the right amount of time, you might starve, but listen, don't let fear immobilize you, all right? You can do it. If you lose your job because of downsizing, because companies are trying to squeeze as much profit as possible out of their companies, then listen, you just got to go somewhere else. There's probably cheese out there somewhere else. But keeping complaining how capitalism sucks and how CEOs just care about profits and not people, and how you have no say into it, like, stop complaining. That's not going to get you some cheese. Keep your head down. Listen to what the masters say, and you'll get your cheese. That's all I had to say. We did more reading than we did explaining, but it was fun. Thank you for sticking out as we read. Yeah, a character died because the CEOs moved the cheese, and because the character did not abide by the CEO's will, and they died. So you don't want to be the person who died, so you better follow the cheese of people who, and follow and do exactly what the people who move the cheese tell you to do. It acknowledges the indifferently cruel and uncaring system and says, live with it with a smile. It's dripping with optimism even. Full of friendly, you can do it, pal, and Hem might learn. Yeah. The system sucks. It's a maze where you get lost and where you sometimes, through a lot of effort, get the ability to eat. But do it with a smile. It's an adventure. It's fun. This is life. It's going through the maze, right? You can do it, pal. It might be, if you don't like it, it's because you're fearful. You're a coward. If you don't like going through the maze, or if you don't like having to adapt to the wills of your masters, it's because you're afraid. You're a coward. It's not because you're critical of the submission that you need to have to your masters. It's because you're afraid. You're afraid of change.